Hey everyone, today we are going to start talking about the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents. So one thing that everyone should have or will have, it's going to be posted to Google Classroom. You're going to have a copy in your binder. There's a copy attached to this key. Is this tips for converting fractions, decimals, and percents chart. So we are going to be going from percents to fractions, fractions to percents. So those are connected together. Fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions, and then decimals to percents and percents to decimals. So I kind of have those all nicely color-coded for you on this particular note sheet. Today we are going to be starting with the fractions, decimals, and percents chart. So you'll see here we have the fractions column, we have a decimals column, and we have a percent column. So we're going to represent each of these numbers in each of the ways. And we can use this tips chart to kind of help us decide what we are supposed to do. So percent means per cent, which is 100. The word cent is 100. So out of 100 is what a percent is. So all percents are out of 100. This very first one is given to us as a fraction. So I'm going to look at how do I get from a fraction to a decimal. Well, to get from a fraction to a decimal, that's going to be on this side over here. It says to write the equivalent ratio with a denominator of 10. Well, if I look at this first one, it already has a denominator of 10. Okay, so it already has a denominator of 10. So then 10 means 1 decimal place. So right there means 1 decimal place. That means that my decimal is 0.10. Not 0.10, just kidding. It means that it's 0.3. So 1 decimal place. So it says write the decimal, 10 means 1 decimal place. So here's my decimal, 1 decimal place. Now I can choose to do the percent in one of two ways. So I can go from the fraction to a percent, or I can go from the decimal to a percent. It doesn't matter to me which way that you choose. I personally like going from a decimal to a percent. So to go from a decimal to a percent, you multiply by 100, which is the same thing as moving the decimal to the right 2 times and then adding a percent sign. So 0.3, I move the decimal to the right 2 times. I'm going to put a 0 in the empty space, and my answer is 30%. If I wanted to go from the fraction to from a fraction to a percent, I'm going to get a 100 on the bottom. So to go from a fraction to a percent, it says write the equivalent ratio with a denominator of 100, and the numerator is your percent. So here I'm going to multiply by 10. So if I multiply by 10 on top, I get 30. It's the same thing, 30%. The second one, I am going from a decimal back to a fraction and then forward to a percent. So to go from a decimal to a fraction. So decimal to fraction is right here. It says write the fraction using the following. If there's 1 decimal place, a 10 goes on the bottom. If there's 2 decimal places, 100 goes on the bottom, and then so on. So for 0.25, I'm going to do 25 over 100 because it is 2 decimal places. And then we always write our fractions in simplest form. So I'm going to simplify this fraction by dividing by 25. And I get 1 over 4. We always want our fractions in simplest form. Again, there are 2 ways to write numbers as percents. I can go from fraction to percent, or I can go from the decimal to the percent. Either way you do it, you should get the same answer. If I use the fraction, the numerator here is already on top of 100, so this is going to be 25%. Or I can take my decimal 0.25, move it to the right 2 places, and I still get 25%. For the next one, I'm starting with the percent, and I'm going to the decimal and then to the fraction. To change a number from a percent to a decimal, I'm going to drop the percent sign, so I'm going to have 65. The decimal is at the end, and I'm going to divide by 100 or move the decimal 2 places to the left. So my decimal is 0.65. And then there's also two ways to think about going to a fraction. I can do the percent as a fraction and then simplify, or I can do the decimal as a fraction and then simplify. In this situation, it's 65 over 100 no matter what I do, because it's two decimal places or it's 65%. So 65 over 100, and then 65 and 100 have a 5 in common. So I get 13 over 20. The next one is our first single digit percent. So we have 9%. So I'm going to first change it into a decimal. So I'm going to start with 9, put my decimal place at the end, move it to the left 2 places. So there's my new decimal, and then I put a 0 in the empty space. So this is 0.09. And then I can do the same thing that I did in the last one when I was given a percent. I can either use the decimal or I can use the percent. I'm going to use the percent because it's easy to put 9 over 100, and 9 over 100 is completely simplified. It's already done. The next one, 1.23, is a percent bigger than 100, but we can still write this as a fraction and as a percent. I'm going to go to the fraction first. Now, when I have a fraction, or when I have a decimal that is bigger than 1 and I want to write a fraction, I'm going to keep the 1 in front, and then I'm going to count the decimal places. Well, there's 2 decimal places, so this is going to be 1 and 23 over 100. So you can keep the whole number in front and then write the decimal as a fraction, and then 23 over 100 cannot be simplified. To change the decimal into a percent, I'm going to move the decimal to the right 2 places. So I get 123, and then I'm going to add a percent. There can be percents bigger than 100, and then we are also going to look at percents less than 1 as well. Because we can have really, really big percents when things grow, and we can have really, really tiny percents when something really, really small is being represented. The next one, 2 over 5. To go from a fraction to a decimal, I'm going to get a 10, 100, 1,000, etc. on the bottom. So I'm going to go to 10 because it's the smallest. So times 2 is going to be 4 over 10. And that's 1 decimal place, so 0.4. And then I can take that decimal, move it 2 places to the right, and I get 40%. For 9 over 12, I'm actually going to simplify that fraction first because 9 over 12 is not completely simplified. And then maybe I'll be able to get that to 10, 100, 1,000, because right now I cannot go from 12 to 10 or 12 to 100. It doesn't work. So I'm actually going to divide by 3 on both the top and the bottom, and I get 3 over 4. Now I can get from 4 to 100 by multiplying by 25. So I get 75 over 100. And I can use this to answer both of the next 2 boxes. So for the 75 over 100, that's going to be 2 decimal places, so 0.75. And then the 75 is on top of 100, so it's 75%. The last one is our example of a number less than 1, so 0.004 is really tiny. This one is 3 decimal places, so it's actually going to be 4 over 1,000. And I am going to simplify that fraction because 4 and 1,000 are both even. You can find the greatest common factor, or you can continue to divide until you get the simplest form of this fraction. I know that 4 and 1,000 have a 4 in common. So this is actually 1 over 250. And then to change the decimal into a percent, I'm going to move it 2 places to the right. So if I have 0.004 and I move the decimal 2 places to the right, 1, 2, it's going to be in between the 0 and the 4. So this is actually 0.4%. And then I have a little challenge question down here that I would like you guys to think about, and we're going to talk about in class. So it says, what do you do if you cannot get to a power of 10 in the denominator of a fraction? How would you convert the fraction to a decimal or a percent? So I want you guys to think about that and come up with your own thoughts, and we can talk about that together.